Hello and welcome to Baseball Barbacast, the only baseball podcast in the world that knows the only person with a 100% squared up rate was Muhammad Ali, because he was always ready to square up. I'm Jake Mintz. That's Jordan Shusterman. Good morning.
Is that what that means?
Yeah, squared up rate is, are you ready to fight?
Square up. Put up your dukes, Jake Mintz. It's time to talk about squaring up and hitting baseballs really hard. On this episode of Baseball Barbacast, we are going to talk about the brand new Statcast metrics that we have been having all kinds of fun sorting and making ridiculously goofy scatter plots with, as have many of our fellow baseball nerdy friends. We're going to talk about what that means, what it is telling us, what we have learned, what we have not learned, what we will learn when this data is actually, multiple years old, because that is, I think, maybe the most important thing. But some fun numbers involving some of our favorite players, and we're going to get into all of that. And then the second half of the show, we're talking about the Phillies, who have the best record in baseball. They actually have now for a few days, and they just keep on rolling. They are just a machine. Even there are some things that are not going well for them, and it doesn't really matter. They keep on winning. That is a sign of a great team. And I would say everything I just said is the exact opposite about the Angels of Anaheim, and we'll touch on that here in a little while, as well as a few other topics. But Jake, we are going to spend the first half of the show on these new bat speed metrics. Where would you like to begin? What is this? Well, maybe there's some people listening to this podcast that have no clue what we're even referring to, right. So we should probably start there.
What is this, and why should you care? Let's spend a little bit of time on that. Statcast, which is, I guess, just a catch-all term we use to talk about fancy MLB released metrics, right? That is, I guess, what is important here is that all Statcast data comes from the league. They dropped a new release. The hot new Mike Petriello album has hit stores, and we now have data about swing tracking. Okay, swing tracking. We've had things like exit velocity and launch angle and barrel rate for a couple of years now. That has all been public. And now for the first time, we have public information on bat tracking technology. Now, why do we have this now? A lot of it has to do with the tech kind of catching up to what we wanted it to be. All these fancy cameras in every baseball stadium are tracking things like 1,000 times a second. And now we can learn things like bat speed and swing length and yada, yada, yada. Now, why should people care about this? Why does this matter?
Yeah. Well, I think, too, you mentioned, that we've had with Statcast, with exit velocity, with some of the offensive numbers that we've grown to get used to. It's also, I think, a nice balancing act because it feels like we've been advancing faster in terms of pitch metrics, right? We have so many details. When you hear references to TrackMan and Rapsodo, and players in their bullpens get to see spin rate and spin axis and all these very nitty-gritty details as to like pitch design. This is pushing more towards getting that information on a hitting side. And that is what I think is really exciting. Now, there are limits to that.
Well, I also think it is very important to note. All of the data that it was just publicly released, this is data that teams and players have had for a couple of years now. There is a device called Blast Motion, no free ads, which is almost like this little... It's a sensor that goes on the bottom of your bat, on the knob of your bat, that can track a lot, if not all, of this data from your bat on swings. Now, the reason this was never public is because MLB can't track that, and hitters are not taking swings in games with the sensors on. It's really for practice.
They are in the minors.
They are in the minors. That is true. Yes. But I should say that like all of this stuff, teams, players have had this, and in terms of how knowing how fast and how hard people are swinging is going to impact player development, that does not change at all this week, in my opinion. I think this is just for the public side and how we try and evaluate players.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I do think that as with any metric, I'm sure some teams have more data than others, and I'm sure some teams are using the data better than others for sure in terms of player identification talent acquisition, whether this involves with the draft, amateur players. Oh, this 16-year-old Dominican outfielder swings the bat a lot faster than that 16-year-old Venezuelan second baseman, right? Like that's, I'm sure something is happening, but this is about us, our public fan understanding. Again, it's more information to help us understand what makes the Major League Baseball players different, not necessarily better, right? In some cases better. We'll talk about what it actually teaches us about quality of these hitters. But what makes these players different? How do they do these? Yeah. How do they achieve their offensive success or ineptitude in different ways? And that, what I think is so much fun.
One quick point on the team side. I did hear from one team employee who said that it is nice to now have another model that they can compare their own internal models to. So I don't want to make it sound like teams are just ignoring this. It certainly isn't going to drastically change the way that they're doing whatever they're doing, but it is somewhat impactful. All right, why should you people care? Okay, why should people care? I think it's just because it's fun. It's fun. Having more information is fun. If you can sift through the information and find quirky things, or listen to people like us who are sifting through the information and finding quirky things, I think that at face will enhance people's understanding and appreciation of the sport of baseball. And that is the point of the whole thing. However, I want to be very clear about something. Over the last couple of days, people, especially on broadcasts, everyone's doing their best, we don't have a thorough understanding of the language around these metrics yet. Even Jake and Jordan don't, and we're so smart. But on this podcast, like, you will hear us stumble over stuff because this is all new. And I'm afraid about people talking past people, about being like, well, this guy's barreled up, or this guy's blast rate is whatever. That doesn't mean anything to common fans yet. And it's going to take time for this language to be easy to digest.
For sure.
And I, as always, worry that if I'm just tuning into a ball game, I can't distinguish between blast rate, sweet spot percentage, squared up rate, and barrel rate, which are all different things. And so as always, I just am a little wary. Let's just make sure people can understand what it is we're talking about.
I still feel that way about some metrics that we have had for a while, especially on the pitch side. Oh, this just has this amount of horizontal, vertical movement. And I think the key, and really where we should start any of this conversation, is what is average, right? That is the most basic way you can understand. And you say, okay, what is the average bat speed for a Major League Baseball player? And it turns out the answer 71.5 miles per hour. That is the average speed at which a major league hitter is swinging the bat. All the swings, all the competitive swings they described, all the swings, 71.5 miles an hour is the average. Okay,
which means you can get pulled over for swinging a bat.
Yes. Well,
if the speed limit's 35,
that's for sure. If it's 35, oh man, yeah.
the scene in The Rookie, where Dennis Quaid is throwing in front of the miles per hour sign.
Well,
they need to do a hitter version. Do a hitter version of that, where Giancarlo Stanton is standing in front of the mile per hour tracker, just swinging 1,000 times. The cop comes and pulls him over.
But to this point, now I know there's some places in the U.S. where the speed limit is 80 miles an hour. I do believe that does exist, or maybe 75. But for the most part, the fastest you're going to see is 70, right? And what that usually means, right, what's the common perception is 9 you're fine, 10 you're mine, from the highway patrol's perspective. And if you go by that, only one man is speeding in most U.S. states, and that is Giancarlo Stanton, whose average bat speed is 80.6 miles per hour. Now, Jake, when we were talking before we started recording this, you said, I didn't need this to tell me that Giancarlo Stanton swings fast. Yes. However, just like when we first got hard hit rates and we first got exit velocity, it is fun. It is delightful to have full validation that even in 2024, after injury after injury after injury, he's aged, he's getting older, this freak is still swinging the bat so much faster than everybody else, because it's not just that he's 10 miles an hour above the average. The average, he is nearly 3 ahead of second place, who is O'Neal Cruz, right? The difference between Giancarlo Stanton and O'Neal Cruz, who's in second, is roughly the same between O'Neal Cruz and like 35th place. Okay. So it is so wonderful. Like, this is the thing. It's just more appreciation of how different he is. And we've been saying for 10 years, like he has managed to separate himself in a raw power category from everybody else in a way that has been difficult to fathom. And it's glorious. It's gloriously accurate. And obviously the other thing that I think is, oh my God, what was this like at his peak? I mean, this is in theory, like a somewhat broken down version of Stanton, and he's still lapping the field. So that is the obvious first takeaway that I think anybody opens up these leaderboards will have.
And does that make him a great hitter in 2024? No. However, it is greatly reassuring to see a number back up what our eyes are telling us. And that is that Giancarlo Stanton is maybe, Jordan, swinging too hard. Okay?
He ain't changing now.
I'm not asking.
You might be right.
Look, I get it. But he is swinging so hard, and we've seen this with our eyes, and it is nice to get it with numbers. And on the flip side of that, the man at the other end of the spectrum here, in terms of bat speed, is Luis Arraez. Okay? And that tracks as well. Luis Arraez is not trying to impact the baseball. He is simply trying to catch it with the barrel of his bat. He is not trying to obliterate it. He is trying to just kind of doink it forward.
Yeah. And that is a reaction to his own, physical capabilities.
Limitations or capabilities, yeah.
Right? Because he understands that while he probably could swing the bat a little bit faster than he does, he has obviously him and, Stephen Kwan, another guy at the bottom of this leaderboard, Justin Turner, another guy near the bottom of this leaderboard who we've seen continue to post elite contact rates. This here is the art of hitting, because when we move into some of these other more advanced metrics, what Luis Arraez is doing is successfully getting the most out of his swing more efficiently than essentially every other hitter in the league. That doesn't mean it is going to produce the most, because this is where bat speed matters, because bat speed contributes to power and contributes to slug. And that is why Luis Arraez is ultimately a limited player, because he is very rarely going to hit the ball over the outfielder. And in baseball, it's good to advance multiple bases at once, sometimes all four with one swing when you hit it over the fence. And usually you need bat speed to do that. However, there are other ways to get hits. And this is a great example of that.
Exactly. And I think that the best way to think about bat speed right now is like fastball velocity, where it helps to have it. You can succeed without it. Players are chasing it in the offseason and trying to develop it. That in and of itself is a concerning trend, less so when it comes to injuries for hitters, but more because the harder you're swinging, the more likely it is that you are not going to contact the baseball. The more likely it is you will whiff through the baseball, the less entertained most of us are by the entire experience. Yes. Having this information public isn't going to worsen that, I believe. Mm-hmm. Blast motion is something that 12-year-olds have been using for 3 years, and so that ship has already sailed, right? But I do think that this reveals what we had already believed, that bat speed is helpful, is desirable, is not needed, but finding a way to increase it without sacrificing the rest of your abilities, without in some way worsening your swing quality, bat speed is something that you do want to try and have.
Yes, and as we've seen with players like Ty France recently, with Mookie Betts, who's talked about how there are ways to train bat speed with certain kinds of, we talk about weighted balls, but like there's different kinds of weighted bats that guys are using differently. It's hard to really describe, but it's essentially bats that you can swing that will help you, again, increase that, whether it's wrist speed, whether it's just these are things that players can train in the offseason. Now, there are still physical limitations, right? There's no world where Luis Arraez can train all he wants. He's never going to be swinging as fast as Giancarlo. I do want to stick, though, at the bottom of this leaderboard, too, because, again, what does this help us do? It helps us appreciate. It's not saying, oh, bat speed good, low, no, bat speed bad. However, when you do look at the bottom of the leaderboard, you understand, and we've talked about this with Arraez so often, how thin the margins are. because you see a rise in Quan at the bottom, who are having fantastic seasons. And you see Nicky Lopez. Okay? Nicky Lopez. You see a guy like, IKF is at the bottom here. Nolan Shanuel, who is a player who clearly has exceptional contact ability and able to make contact, but it is not enough quality contact. And he hasn't quite perfected that art to where he can actually be productive in a way that a Rise and Quan are. Whereas Giancarlo, he's swinging faster than everybody else. He's missing a ton, and that's not great. And that's why he's not an elite hitter anymore. But also, when he's connecting, he's hitting it over the fence at 120 miles an hour, and that is what allows him to continue to be a productive baseball player. But to your point, when you're saying, okay, we want to train that, we want to combine those things, that's the other fun part about messing around with these leaderboards, is finding the players that are able to marry both. And this is where, surprise, surprise, Juan Soto, all you have to load, but any way you slice it, you want to pull up just a regular old triple slash line and his homers and his RBIs, and you watch him. We know Juan Soto is special, but this is another way to quantify that, and that is what makes this so fun.
Right. So the other big metric here is swing length, right? How short are you to the baseball? Swing length is measured in feet, okay? And Giancarlo Stanton and Javi Baez have the longest swings in baseball, and a good way to think about this is slider in the other batter's box. Javi Baez tries to hit it and misses. That is a long swing because the bat is traveling a longer distance through the time that the bat is being swung, right? That is where you get like the biggest swing this season is from Giancarlo, is a slider in the other batter's box that he reaches for because it's like 10 feet worth of swing, right? Because he's reaching for that. Now, the opposite is a very short swing. This is a player whose hands probably start further closer forward towards the hitting zone. This is a player who's going to be more contact oriented, a player who probably is better at getting to a pitch on the inside half of the plate because the shorter distance you have, right, that pitch is closer to you. You want to be shorter to the baseball. And so the true freaks are the guys who could do a backflip in a phone booth, right? They can explode a ton of energy and power and speed in a very small window of space. And those are the players that I'm like, that's what I want to watch. And when you go to this leaderboard and you plot these two things out, the players who are super fast and pretty short are basically the best young players in the world, right? This is Gunnar Henderson. This is Corbin Carroll, who has looked definitely better recently. Riley Green, Ellie De La Cruz, Bobby Witt, Juan Soto. These are William Contreras. Being able to explode a ton of energy in a very small window is, and always really has been, the magic of hitting.
And yes, I think your point about swing speed and swing length and the combination of efficiently swinging with, legitimate velocity is very relevant. And I think when you plot those and you'll look at all these really special young hitters that are able to do this, Wyatt Langford stands out in that regard. And we know he hasn't necessarily gotten the results that he's, been looking for so far as a rookie, but that is still a sign of kind of what makes him special. You see Corey Seager kind of on that list as well. But ultimately it is about results as well, right? It is about how you're actually making contact with the ball and what happens when you do.
Do you bang?
Yeah. Do you bang? Do you bang? Scientifically, right? And so that is how we get to the squared up rate. And so I will say, while I agree with you that we are all going to maybe stumble to efficiently describe and explain these, MLB is doing a great job in terms of putting a very succinct and clear definition on the website. And so I appreciate that. And so when we are talking about squared up rate, it is, from my understanding, a better version of hard hit rate, because what this is instead of hard hit rate is how often are you hitting the ball 95 miles an hour or plus, right? We've decided that a hard hit baseball is 95 miles an hour exit velocity or higher, because if you hit it that hard, the average of balls that are hit that hard goes up a lot, slugging, everything. So that's why it is good to hit the ball hard. However, what squared up rate takes into account is the maximum possible exit velocity for a baseball that you are hitting. And what that is based on is both how fast you are swinging and how fast the pitch is coming in. And so what that is telling us is it is accounting for how fast you're swinging. And that's why who is the leader on this squared up rate category? It is still Luis Arraez in terms of per swing basis. And that means that Luis Arraez on 43.3% of his swings is hitting a ball with at least an 80% of the maximum possible velocity that the ball could be hit with. So every pitch, for example, okay, a pitch comes in at 90 miles an hour. For example, if you swing a bat at a certain speed, it could exit the bat at 110 miles an hour. That is the maximum possibility. And that, of course, equation shifts depending on the pitch speed and the bat speed, right?
Just quickly, a simple way to think about that is like the hitter is moving the bat at a speed. The ball is leaving the bat at a speed. The speed that the batter is swinging with obviously has a huge impact on how fast the ball is moving. And that is why exit velocity and bat speed are different, though correlated.
Yes. And so to that point, that is how you see, okay, on this percentage of Luis Arraez swings, he is achieving at least 80% of the maximum possible velocity based on the speed of the pitch and the speed of the bat. That is incredible, right? Whereas if you go to the bottom, you have guys who maybe do have exceptional bat speed, guys like Jorge Soler, guys like Matt Chapman, who can swing the bat fast, but their percentage of times that they're achieving the 80% of the maximum possible velocity is down under 20%. So that's an example of where, okay, great, that's awesome that you can swing the bat, but that makes sense intuitively too. I know that the whole problem with Matt Chapman is that he can swing the bat really fast, but he is not squaring it up that up. It's not just that he's whiffing, it's that even when he is making contact, he isn't necessarily hitting it with the maximum exit velocity based on how fast he's swinging the bat, because his accuracy of the barrel is not remotely close to what it is of Luis Arraez. And this is what gets us to our final number, which is the blast rate, which is essentially that, except factoring in the minimum speed that you are swinging the bat. And this is where you get to that perfect combination of the guys who are able to swing the bat very fast and consistently hit the ball about as well as you can hit it, or 80% of the maximum velocity. And this is where you get to Juan Soto. This is where you get to Shohei Ohtani. This is where you get at the top of the leaderboard to William Contreras, who's making a case for being the best catcher in baseball. And that is what is really exciting. And that, to me, is, I honestly like this more than barrel rate. Because I think that this is something that, while maybe it doesn't necessarily correlate exactly to slugging percentage and all those things, this is what impresses me the most when I'm trying to understand what hitters are trying to do, which is swing fast and square the ball up.
It could just be do you bang rate.
Mm-hmm. You can pitch
those guys
DM
all
Mike
bang.
Petriello. Just say, do you bang? I mean, yeah, I think I'd love to hear that more in the broadcast. So,
I will admit we're 20 minutes in, and I feel overwhelmed by this, and I feel like we are talking in circles in a way, and I just kind of want to watch guys hit.
Okay, that's fine.
Like, I just want to watch a bunch of swings now. But what I want to finish with is, like, it's overwhelming. It's confusing. You can enjoy the sport without understanding all of this. You can enjoy the sport by understanding some of this. You can enjoy this by understanding none of it, right? Like, it's fine. What I am most excited by is to see changes over time. Okay. And I mean that in two ways. One, if a guy's bat speed is 76 and then for a 2-week stretch it's 71, guess what? He's probably hurt. Okay. We can't just jump to that conclusion, but you can ask as a reporter, hey, your bat speed has dropped a ton. You're nursing a shoulder thing. Are you okay? Right? That is a helpful way. That is like something that I can imagine enhancing my job. Right.
Yeah.
And the other is that over time where a guy gets older and his bat speed gets worse. Right. We say, oh, well, this bat speed just doesn't look the same as it used to. The hand speed's gone down. Like Ricky Weeks, right? The second Ricky Weeks, like his hand speed got slower, he fell off a cliff because that was this whole game. We will be able to see that over time and measure that kind of before the fact. And then the last thing I want to mention is, this is really when it comes to swing length, is we can measure swing changes in a way that we couldn't before. And so much of player performance from the public side and trying to understand whether or not a player is going to get better, it's really difficult because If a player says, oh, I made this swing change, guess what? It might not have any meaningful impact when you dig into the data. And if it doesn't have any meaningful impact, then there's really no point. Like, oh, my front foot is open longer, but none of my swing rate or swing speed stuff has changed at all. Like, I don't care. You could use a tennis racket. It wouldn't impact the way I'm going to think about you as a player. But as we don't know any of this yet because we don't have data over time. But let's say who's struggling right now? Alex Bregman, right? Let's say Alex Bregman gets hot and says he changed something with his swing. And we take a look at his swing stuff and it says that his attack angle, which is something we don't have yet, increased X% in the last 3 weeks. We then have proof that the swing change led to a meaningful impact in terms of on-field performance. And that can elicit stories. And because at the end of the day, that is really what I care the most about. And I think obviously what you care the most about. And that is just telling interesting stories about baseball. Yeah. And I think that so much of this data, if you look at it on its face, doesn't feel like a story. It doesn't, it feels like a bunch of numbers on a page. And I understand that and I'm sympathetic to that. And I think that the best people in the business who are really good at that will find nuggets of gold in the haystack, which is a metaphor, and treat us to very interesting stories. And so if you are the type of person who, like me, is overwhelmed by a lot of this and feels like me, kind of a simpleton by not understanding all of it right now, like pick and choose what you want to care about and trust that smart people like Jordan will hold your hand and show you the magic.
I mean, I would say, yeah. I mean, my basic take is any sort of reluctance to embrace this, which is fine because to your point, yeah, there's going to be degrees to which you want to. No one should have to go look at this, but it's all available, right? If you haven't looked at Baseball Savant, if you haven't played around on it, like you'll find things that I haven't even thought of, right? You can sort through all kinds of stuff, see how guys swing on 2 strikes, see how guys swing. I think some of the switch hitting stuff is super interesting. Oh, Ellie De La Cruz swings the bat way faster from the left side than from the right side. There's infinite possibilities here. And to me, there's nothing wrong with more information. It's just how you choose to embrace it. And that's fine. Everyone is going to have different levels of that. And that's okay.
When I was a sophomore in college, I took like a computer programming geographic information systems class and was so overwhelmed that I just dropped it 3 weeks in because I didn't understand anything that was going on. And when a lot of this new batch of things dropped, I felt the same way. Where it was like, am I too dumb to understand and appreciate this thing that all these people around me are getting? And that can be, just quickly, as a fan, disheartening and frustrating. And you can have a tendency to kind of just leave it behind. What I would urge people is you will start to get it over time and you don't really have a choice because this is going to become a part of our world. Just because it's going to be on broadcast and in articles and you will get more comfortable. Think about how we felt about average exit velocity when it first came out, right? That felt weird. And I think that now it's, oh, how hard did you hit the baseball? That is pretty understandable and digestible. A couple quick examples of ways that this is interesting, and then we can take a break. Mm-hmm. So let's start actually with Bryson Stott. Okay. Bryson Stott doesn't swing that hard. He had 15 home runs last year. Mm-hmm. Okay. Why? Well, he's really good at elevating the baseball to the pull side and he's short to the ball. Cool. I asked Bryson Stott yesterday at the game, hey, your bat speed sucks. How do you feel about that? And he said, doesn't matter how fast you swing when you hit it all the time. And Bryson Stott, who has been on fire the last 3 weeks, is right.
I mean, and there have been so many very basic, fun, easy nuggets that, Jeff Passan put in his great story digging into it, is that, the best hitter in baseball and the worst hitter in baseball have the same average bat speed. That's Shohei Ohtani and that's Javier Baez. Mookie Betts is someone that I'm eternally fascinated by. I've talked about how his game power is significantly greater than his raw power. And that is shown, right? His average, bat speed is the same as Luis Rengifo. Okay, great. One of them is obviously a lot better at elevating the ball. His squared up rate is well above average, right? 42.8% compared to Luis Rengifo, 28.9%. That is an example of how often Mookie Betts is getting the best out of his swings, even if he is not swinging as fast as most of the league.
Here's another example. Mm-hmm. Here's a fun one. Jackson Holiday. Okay. Orioles top prospect who came up and looked horrible. Okay.
Yeah, I haven't even looked at him yet because he's below the minimum. Yeah.
He had the highest whiff rate in baseball, which means that he is just swinging through so many pitches. And that comes even though he has a pretty short swing. It's a below average short swing. You would imagine the longer the swing, the more whiffs you're going to have, and that is generally true. But Jackson Holliday, what that tells me is that it wasn't necessarily a mechanical issue. He was just overwhelmed and getting sequenced weird and was just sitting on pitches and wasn't adjusting correctly. And that the swing itself may have some issues, but it's more about how he's perceiving the ball and the decision making he's having.
I'm so glad you mentioned Jackson Holliday because it reminded me, right? I've been sorting these leaderboards, I've been keeping it as the qualified number where it's, at least 100 swings or whatever. But if you lower that to, 5 or 10, here's a really interesting one. If you lower the minimum total swings to 25, who's number 2 on average bat speed? Matt Wallner. Okay, Matt Wallner is at 78.4, right? Up above O'Neal Cruz, above Kyle Schwarber, above all these guys, right? But he's in the minors because talk about swinging too hard. He was swinging too hard and his barrel accuracy was catastrophic to the point where he was so unproductive because it was completely an unsustainable amount of whiffs. And, we saw him balance that more last year, and it helps tell the story of, that explains why when Matt Wallner was feeling it, he was one of the best hitters in baseball at times last season, but also when it's going wrong, it can go wrong very, very, very quickly.
2 more nuggets. 3 more nuggets. If you go by team, sorting this by team is interesting. And you get some pretty obvious things, right? Cleveland, the Guardians are towards the bottom in terms of bat speed, and they're up there in terms of short swing. That makes sense. Think of the guys in the Guardians. A lot of them are short with short arms who make a lot of contact, right? That's not surprising. At the top is really interesting. No one swings harder than the Atlanta Braves, which, they are so talented. Like the Atlanta Braves just have, I think, the best baseball players top to bottom. And I think that they're the most skilled or, naturally gifted baseball players too. Their bat speeds are just off the charts compared to everybody else, right? That's Acuna, Ozuna, Austin Riley are all just at the top in terms of dudes who just swing really hard. And that confirms what we've seen from them, where it feels like they're hitting a home run every 5 minutes, right? Related, the Orioles are an outlier in terms of how hard they're swinging and how short they're swinging as a team. And that tracks with some of the player development stuff that they're trying to emphasize, right? Short, quick, good decision-making. You see this a lot in guys like Jordan Westberg, right? Really short swing, still is able to kind of have a lot of bat speed through the zone. So that's kind of what stuck out with teams. 2 other fun ones that I did. Looking at differences in 0-0 counts to the rest of the count. Who are the players that are swinging harder on the first pitch, right? And you think about this from a story perspective, who's coming out to the plate and just swinging out of their shoes on 0-0 counts, right? Who's going for the fences? And you would see that in average bat speed, in 0-0 counts being higher, and swing length being higher, right? And what's fun about this is when you go to average bat speed, if we're looking at biggest deltas, the player with the biggest difference in 0-0 counts compared to the average is Luis Urias on the Mariners, who has a relatively slow bat speed. But with 0-0 counts, my guy is freaking hacking. This list is in no way a gaggle of good players, just to be clear. Sure. Luis Urias, Luis Guillorme, Jose Abreu, Jose Miranda, Robbie Grossman, Randall Grichuk. Like this is not telling us anything about how to be good. My favorite is that Luis Urias is 1 and Ramon Urias is like 13. And the idea that these 2 brothers have the exact same approach where in 0-0 counts, they're going out there and swinging really hard makes a lot of sense because they grew up together. I love that.
First pitch is sometimes the best one you're going to get. And they are embracing that. So no, that is a fun one. Yeah. Some of the filters that you can do is really cool. I mentioned the switch hitter one, think Ben Clemens had a really good note that Ketel Marte, who people know, Ketel Marte, he's better from the right side. his swing speed from the right side is also like top 5 in baseball. I think maybe even number 2 behind only Giancarlo Stanton, and he also bats lefty. So it's like that is obviously his average comes down because he's also swinging left-handed. But that's an incredible thing when you think about guys that are even able to do that.
One last nugget: the Washington Nationals have the top 2 hitters who have slower bat speeds in 0-0 counts. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So the players, you would imagine that most players would swing harder in an 0-0 count than the rest of the count if they're trying to be aggressive to the first pitch. You're trying to drive the baseball, right? Mm-hmm. Riley Adams and Joey Meneses swing on average about 2.5 miles an hour slower on an 0-0 count than they do the rest of the at-bat. Okay. Super weird.
I got nothing on that. Super weird. I have no idea.
If I'm the Nationals hitting coach, I'm like, hey guys, just swing harder.
Yeah. All right. Well, maybe I might see the Nats next week. Maybe I'll let them know.
Okay.
Riley, just come on, man.
Just swing, man.
Believe in yourself.
Also, dude, talk about a guy where I'm like, oh, wow, he's got some good bat tracking numbers. Riley Adams.
Riley Adams. There you go. There you go. So yeah, again, we encourage everyone to go check it out on Baseball Savant. See what you find. Again, there's going to be it's so new, it's so fresh. It's both overwhelming, but it's also exciting because there's just parts and versions and different combinations of these scatter plots that we haven't even dreamt up yet. Some people are going to uncover and make some interesting points and some fun analysis. But to your point, we are just trying to tell stories and learn more about these players. And this is more information to help us do that. And I think that's a great thing.
All right. Let's swing quick into a break. And when we return,
quick break.
We'll shorten up when we get back. All right. We'll just try and put the pod in play. We'll talk to you in a sec. And welcome back to Baseball Barbacast. Jake Mintz, Jordan Shusterman. Let's talk about the Philadelphia Phillies and then the Angels and then say goodbye. I saw the Phillies the last 2 days here in New York City. They won both of those games against the New York Metropolitans. They are the first team to 30 wins, which means they have the best record in baseball. They're totally rolling, even though not everything has gone their way. And that's a really good message about life, Jordan. You have to keep moving forward, even if you're getting bad breaks. And the Phillies have done that. Yesterday's game, very weird. Aaron Nola, complete game shutout, pitching to Garrett Stubbs, friend of the show. Garrett Stubbs catching 3 games in a row for the first time since he was in the minor leagues in 2019. That is because JT Realmuto has a bit of a boo-boo and is not going on the IL. And so Garrett has had to fill in for him. And I guess we'll probably catch again today. We'll see. But Garrett Stubbs exhausted catching. Bryce Harper scratched 20 minutes before first pitch. And so the Phillies had 4 infielders all playing out of position. Alec Boehm, who usually plays third, was playing first. Cody Clemens, who usually plays first, was playing second. Bryson Stott, who usually plays second, was playing short. And Whit Merrifield, who usually just, plays the out left field or second base, he was playing third base. And yet, the Phillies won 4-0 against the Mets. Bizarre, hilarious. This team is incredibly good. I feel like the fan base doesn't really know what to do because the last 2 years, the Phillies have been kind of bad out the gate and then figured things out as the year went on. And
it's setting up a pretty interesting dynamic, right? Because I don't know how far into the season they have to be in first place for it to feel like, this would be like a choke job if the Braves win the division, because that seems harsh to say because as we just talked about, the Braves are also amazing. But, at some point we will be, we should already be considering it. I don't know, we should be talking about this as a very, very intense division race that could have big ramifications. But I don't know. Do you think that's, I know it's only May, but I don't know. Do you kind of see what I'm getting at? I feel like even Phillies fans would have been like, oh yeah, we'll win 93 games and have the first wild card again. And then we'll beat the Braves in the next round.
I think Phillies fans are generally aware how easy the schedule has been for the Phillies. I just want to, can I just read through the opponents? I don't know if you've done this. It's actually comical.
I'm just looking at recently. it's, wow. It is
I'm just going to do the whole year.
Really bad. Sure.
I'm just going to do the whole year. Braves, start the year. Fine. Okay. Since April 1st, Reds, bad. Nats, pretty bad. Cardinals, horrible. Pirates, bad. Rockies, bad. White Sox, bad. Reds, bad. Padres, all right. They did sweep them. Angels, disastrous. Giants, very bad. Blue Jays, probably bad. Marlins, definitely bad. And now the Mets. Okay. Now I know that a lot of the National League is kind of bad right now, which helps this, but they just have yet to play some of the good teams, right? They haven't seen the Brewers yet. They haven't seen the Cubs yet. They haven't seen the Dodgers yet. They've only played the Braves once.
I mean,
whereas the Braves have seen a lot of those better teams in the National League so far this season. I still think the Braves are definitely the favorite in the division. That being said, the closer the Phillies keep it, the longer the Phillies can keep it close is how a person would say that. The less the Braves can plan for the playoffs. And what I mean by that is I talked about their starting pitching, right? They probably would like to give some of their starters, Atlanta, a rest at some point because so many of them haven't thrown 150 innings in a while. And whether or not they're able to do that the way that they want will be directly tied to what their lead looks like in the division.
Sure.
Right. So if the Phillies fall apart over the next 3 weeks and the Braves take a 10-game lead, the Braves would feel more comfortable throwing Reynaldo Lopez on the Phantom IL and having him skip 3 starts. Right. Whereas if the Phillies are up by a game or they keep it close, the Braves don't have the luxury to do that. And, the same is true with the Phillies, to be clear, giving their guys a rest. However, I don't think many people expected the Phillies to win the division this season. And so
to that point, yeah, I just wanted to say, just to kind of refresh myself on this, it's not like the projection systems didn't think the Phillies were going to be good. They just thought the Braves were going to be unbelievable, right? And so going back and opening day, the Fangraphs gave the Braves a 91.5% chance. By the way, I want to just be clear about something. People, the phrasing of what I just said, Fangraphs, they gave them it's a model. It's math. It's not Meg Rowley deciding the Phillies have a 2% chance to win the division. Okay, so when people get pissed at Fangraphs, be like, Fangraphs is a joke. Like, you're talking about a math problem. All right,
you're yelling at
if
a
you want to
computer,
argue with
dog.
that, like, anyway, okay. So I just want to say that. But the point is, opening day, Braves 91%, whatever, 92% to win the division.
What's that at now? Can I guess?
Yeah.
That's probably like 77.
72. Okay. So the Phillies are now up to, 27% chance. So that's notable. That's big strides. They're 2 games up right now and it's the middle of May. So long way to go.
I would say that at least half of that has to just be because Spencer Strider's out.
So that's a good question. Again, I know certain different playoff odds and different projections are factoring in the exact roster versus just the standings and everything. So I again, forgive my ignorance. I'm not sure exactly which ones these are.
So ignorant. Ignorant.
So I apologize because I know, again, some different systems use different factors. But to that point, I think that is about right. That feels about right. It feels like the Phillies have shown us enough that a 27% chance to win the division feels about right. I might even say it's a little bit higher.
I think it's actually lower, personally. Okay. I think the Phillies' strength of schedule so far this season is a huge... those teams mostly all stink. And I think the Phillies are really good. Like, I think they're probably a 95 true win team. However, they are playing... It's good that they're racking up wins.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. Right? They're banking those. They've done everything they can with the schedule that they've been presented. In the same way that I feel about the Braves rotation, that I have worries about them. They've done everything. They were amazing again last night. They've done everything possible that they could do. However, over the long haul, I have some doubts. My skepticism about the Phillies winning the division has more to do with how good I think the Braves are than anything about the Phillies. But there's definitely no doubt the Phillies are a good baseball team. They took the first 2 games of the series from the Mets. They're now going from Queens to Philadelphia to play the next 2 games. This wonky schedule is because of the London series. So the Phillies and Metro are playing in London, I believe, next month. And in order to make up for that, they each lose a home game, which leads to this bizarre scheduling. And that raises the question, is this an opportunity? Does this count as 1 series or 2 seri?
So again, it started since I've tracked these 4-game series, these opportunities very closely. I go through the schedule at the start of every year, and I see on the schedule, okay, there's 4 games in a row, boom, 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 and I have a whole doc that just tracks all of them, and then that's how I keep track of it. But this one caught my attention because I was like, wait, what is this? Like, I know that this is possible because they're a short train ride away, but I have never seen this before, where it is 2 consecutive 2-game sets in 2 different cities with the same teams. I've seen their 2-game series is not that rare, although it is pretty rare for teams in the same division. As you mentioned, it is about London, but I'm struggling with this, especially since the Phillies have taken the first 2. If they take the next 2 in Philadelphia, is this a mop, Jake? Can we consider this a mop?
Yes. You are playing the same team. That is
in consecutive days.
In consecutive days. And that to me is what is impressive. And you are facing the same hitters every day.
Yep.
You are facing many of the same relievers. You are game planning against the same team. The venue changing, in my opinion, doesn't make it any different. I would say that a road mop is more impressive than a half and half mop.
Yeah, right. The split mop.
Which
is what the Phillies are heading towards.
But my sense is that all of the players on these teams are seeing this as a 4-game set. They are approaching it as a 4-game set. And I will say, I thought it was a 4-game set. Yeah. I planned my whole week around seeing the Phillies in New York on Wednesday and Thursday. And then yesterday at the yard, I said, I'll see you tomorrow to somebody. And they said, are you coming to Philly? And I said, no. And they said, what are you talking about? And I said, you're not playing here tomorrow? And they said, no, we're going to Philly. And I was like, why? And then I went down this whole rabbit hole and I felt like a total idiot.
All right. So we'll keep an eye on that. I mean, of course, if the Mets can squeak out a game, I don't have to worry about the official mop labeling.
Let us know.
But yeah, let us know. Is this 1 series or 2? I am very curious. All right, a couple more quick topics before we say goodbye. As you mentioned, everything's going right in Philadelphia. Everything is going wrong in Anaheim. Last night, just, again, it's not that the Angels are bad. Okay, that's fine. I mean, it's unfortunate because it's going to be 9 straight losing seasons or whatever. It's how they're doing it. And that Ron Washington, who in theory, was brought in not to bring energy and a win now mentality and all these things, but the fundamentals, the defense, the base running, and inexplicably, this is the team that has made the most base running blunders, the most small ball errors, the most fielding gaffes, is the Angels. And while we can talk about the specific play last night.
I have to.
But yeah, please go ahead. Just talk about this.
Okay, so I think it's 7-6 Cardinals, bottom of the 8th. Angels are rallying. Cardinals pitcher Jojo Romero's on the mound and can't really throw strikes. He's all over the place. So 2nd and 3rd, 1 out. It is a bases loaded. Excuse me, bases loaded. It's a left on left situation. Luis Guillorme is up. And Ron Washington calls a suicide squeeze, which is where the hitter squares to bunt and the runner runs home and the hitter bunts the ball and the runner scores. He was trying to tie the game that way. However, what happens is Luis Guillorme just totally whiffs on the bunt because it's a slider in the other batter's box. The runner is just tagged out running home, which is the most hilarious, doofy thing in baseball. Used to do this all the time in baseball video games, and I would try suicide squeezes. Yes. And miss them. Yes. And in baseball video games, it's great because the runner doesn't actually give up. They just keep running full speed into the catcher, right? It's great. Anyway, so doesn't get the bunt down. Runner's out. They don't score in the inning. They lose by 1 run. After the game, Ron Washington is basically blaming Luis Guillorme for not getting the bunt down. And I liked the energy that Wash brought, the accountability, saying that Guillorme has to get the bunt down. And Guillorme said as much in his post-game interview as well, that is the point of a suicide squeeze, right? No matter where it is, you got to get bat on ball. You can't leave that runner out to dry. And Guillorme did his best, and the ball was in the other batter's box. I understand all those things. The problem here, Jordan, is the decision to call this play is fun, and I love and respect Wash. This was the wrong call in this spot. You have left on left, sure, and you don't want the guy to ground a double play. But the guy's not throwing he hasn't thrown strikes.
Just stand there. Jojo Romero's throwing it to the backstop.
Just stand there.
But also, again, it's like we're getting to the nitty gritty. respectfully, the Angels had Luis Guillorme batting in this situation. You know, like and when Sam Blum and Angels writers keep asking Wash, like, okay, what's going on? Like, what is the plan? Is this a rebuild? What's it? Bass Paramanisi? And they say, no, we have to win, even though we're however many games under 500. I appreciate that Ron Washington is taking this seriously and wants these players to win, but also now Luis Guillorme doesn't count in this, and this is, I have to imagine that the fact that Luis Guillorme couldn't get this down was taken more seriously than had Zach Neto not taken, because one of the themes of the Angels season, which has been very interesting to watch Wash try and deal with this, is on one hand saying we intend to win. We are going out there and we are trying to compete and contend. I didn't come here to lose. But also,
I wish he'd said the opposite. I came here to lose.
But also, he has repeatedly referenced how he says, like, but, we're growing, we're learning. Look at our roster. First year player at first year player at short, first year player in the outfield, first year blah 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 blah. Like, look at all these rookies, look at all these young players who've barely played in the major leagues. And I remember asking him this last month when the Angels were in Cincinnati. I said, Wash, what is different now for you as a manager between you doing it now with when you did it in Texas? He's like, well, when I was in Texas, I had a lot of veterans who knew what Major League Baseball was about. And now I have a lot of players who do not know, who it's not their fault. They just don't have the experience. And so it's about patience and teaching the young players like how this is going to work. That is not something, as we are seeing, that is often a recipe for consistent Major League success. This roster is shorthanded. There is no depth. They are very injured, and it is unfortunate. And so I don't know where this is heading. It really sucks that this is how this has gone. It has gone about as poorly as you could have possibly expected. The Ron Washington era. Is it his fault? No. Is he helping? I don't know. But it's just I don't know how you're supposed to fix this. We know we say it always goes back to the top, but man, there's just so much work that's going to have to be done on this roster for this to get back to anything resembling competence.
I want to defend Wash very quickly. People had a problem with him throwing Guillorme under the bus, and I don't think that is what he's guilty of here. He's guilty of not admitting that this specific instance was not necessarily Guillorme's entire fault.
Yeah.
Right? Wash, let's say that had been a pitch down the middle and he misses it, right? Wash is totally within his rights to go up there and say, like, he needs to get the bunt down. I think that being held accountable in that instance is totally fine. And part of what makes Wash kind of a different energy and why people respect him is that he shoots straight. He's not going to beat around the bush. The issue is that he's just wrong in this particular instance and said a bunch of things that weren't true, right? When he went up and got in front of the mic. And so I really like and respect Wash, and I want this to be good, but it won't. And that's not his fault. A bunch of other things from around the traps. Ronel Blanco tossed for sticky stuff. I don't care. Everyone is still using something.
And by the way, right. So like the umpire says after the game, it was the stickiest stuff I've felt on the glove since we've been doing this for a few years now. That's what Eric Backus said. Dan Bellino said a very similar thing about Max Scherzer last year when he was ejected. I think that policing for sticky stuff and that sticky stuff is not as much in the game is a good thing. I do believe that. Okay.
Better.
And I think that doing the checks all the time has generally done its job. I also think that if you do them all the time, occasionally, because of whatever he had, which I don't think he was cheating, I think it's just a matter of you do enough checks. Eventually, sometimes it's going to be more sticky than the other times. And I think that's what happened here. So I don't really care that much. I think he might end up getting suspended. I think that's unfortunate. But like, this is kind of going to be part of the game, and it sucks. But I do think it's better because pitching is good enough. If these guys were still using as much sticky stuff as they were before, batting averages would be in the 100s instead of the low 200s.
Rhys Hoskins on the IL with a strained hamstring. And the reason this is significant, besides he's been raking for the Brewers, is that the Brewers, I believe, are heading back to Philadelphia soon. And so the Rhys Hoskins Citizens, it's the first week of June, I believe. The Rhys Hoskins
first week of June.
Strained hamstring IL stint puts that reunion in jeopardy. I know that's a day that a lot of people in Philly and Rhys's wife Jamie were looking forward to. So hopefully he is back by that time, or at least makes the trip. Outstanding revenge game last night. Eric Fetty for the White Sox against the Nats. Eric Fetty, had he not come up with the Nationals and their horrendous pitching development apparatus, I think would have been a very good major league starting pitcher for the last 6 years. And I think Eric Fetty is well within his rights to, I don't know if he feels this way, but if I were Eric Fetty, I would hate the Nationals and I would feel slighted and I would feel robbed and I would feel like I could have made more money and been a better pitcher had I known certain things at the time. And he went out and just shoved it to the Nats yesterday. And I think that freaking rules. I know of players who feel this way about the Rockies, which is funny, like former Rockies pitchers who are like, yeah, all I had to do is leave and throw to one Rapsodo, and I figured it out. Speaking of the Rockies, they're on fire. They have won 6 in a row, beating the Padres in the first 2 games of that series. In San Diego. Like we said 2 days ago, great for the Rockies and their fans. Joy in a bubble in a short window is still joy. I have no notes about that. Jordan, anything else? I think it's time to say goodbye.
No, I think that's it. The Giants are very injured right now, and I keep flip-flopping between Giants and Padres as to who I'm more concerned about. It's the Giants. I mean, at this point, their injuries, it's just some of them are fluky, some of them are what you would expect, and it's going very, very, very poorly.
The Soler thing yesterday?
So again, like they've had Patrick Bailey a concussion, and then Soler is working his way back. He's taking BP. He fouls a ball off the top of the cage and it hits him in the head. I mean, like cartoonish stuff. Hopefully he's okay. Jung-Hoo Lee, he's out. Like it's not going great in San Francisco, and they are going to fall down. Now, again, fortunately, we've said this about a lot of teams. Fortunately, a lot of these NL teams are pretty mid, so they're not totally out of it yet, but they got to get going here soon. And the last thing I will say, Jake, Jason Dominguez began his rehab assignment yesterday, and I don't know. It's not like he's going to come back next week. It's going to take some time to ramp him back up. But I'm super interested to see how quickly he kind of works his way back into the Yankees offense, into the Yankees outfield. Trent Grisham has barely played already and has been terrible when he's played. It's kind of wild to me how just out of the picture he's been. I imagine Dominguez coming back is only going to make that even more so. So some interesting things with the Jason Dominguez return, which I don't think I fully. I was thinking about that more of as a second half problem, and so it'll be really interesting to see how he kind of meshes his way back into the Yankees lineup. But that's of course a bigger topic for another day. Thank you all for listening. Thank you to Andrew Hartz for producing. We'll be back on Friday. Maybe we'll read some emails on Friday. Keep those emails coming. Baseballbarbcast@gmail.com. BARBcast. Any final thoughts? Brian Wu starts today. I hope he doesn't leave this start with forearm tightness. Okay, bye.
It's good when your forearm is tight, and it's bad when your forearm's tight.